Hi, everyone. So I'm going to speak to you today about youth physical activity interventions in the mass media sector. So first, just a little bit about youth in the United States. So the target population of youth includes individuals ages 9 to 17. This does involve individuals that fall into the upper end of the developmental period divided by childhood and the beginning/middle area of adolescence. The intervention that I'll be detailing later in this presentation also refers to this group as tweens. Um, Also, the national recommendation for youth is currently at 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. The recommendation also specifies that most of these days should involve 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic physical activity, and that 3 of these days should specifically include vigorous intensity physical activity. So also during this time period and more recently, there's been an increasing concern with this age group um, in regards to the amount of time that is spent sedentary. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. So sedentary lifestyle has been linked with increased risk of overweight and obesity. Currently, there is an obesity rate with children of 18%. Obesity rates in children and adolescents have significantly increased over the past several decades. In addition, youth just make up about a quarter of the United States population, and with only a quarter of those meeting the national recommendations, it is really important to just focus on increasing physical activity within this population. So, a few of the barriers and factors to consider when talking about physical activity in youth include personal, social, and environmental factors. A very thorough meta analysis of qualitative research exploring youth barriers to physical activity reported that attitude factors, including the meaning and preference developed throughout childhood about physical activity and what it means to be active, included also perceptions of benefits of engaging in physical activity, their personal body image, and perceptions of norms surrounding activity in relationship also to just their body image and gender identity. With youth, transitioning from childhood to adolescence also brings a shift in priorities in the way that they want to be spending their time. So this kind of goes into social norms because during this age, individuals are becoming increasingly more cognizant of their social positioning. And so, social support and norms with their family, their friends, and even other influential members of one's social network, such as PE teachers, coaches, and role models, influence youth's attitudes and willingness to engage in physical activity. And finally, some environmental factors that can also present barriers for engaging in physical activity include access to a place to work out or be active, as well as the quality and safety of recreational infrastructure. Okay, so jumping into the intervention that I looked at. So, when you're looking at physical activity interventions for youth in the mass media sector, one of the most highly prominent interventions that I guess, or most well known interventions has been the CDC's program VERB. It spanned 4 years from 2002 to 2006. The CDC's researchers behind the program specifically described the program as a multi-ethnic campaign that combines paid advertisements with school and community promotions and internet activities to encourage children ages 9 to 13 years of age to be physically active every day. The program took place nationwide in the United States with 9 high-dose communities. These are areas that just received extra advertisements and communication products. These specific areas were also chosen with the idea that they'd be representative of diverse communities in different areas of the country. Looking at cultural considerations, VERB did specifically take cultural considerations into mind, thus being able to claim itself as a multi-ethnic campaign. The intervention used both surface and deep structure strategies in its development and implementation, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more when I discuss the theory and framework used for this intervention. Okay, so VERB used a social marketing framework, adapting this framework's 4 Ps, which are product, place, price, and promotion, to include elements of behavior change into it. So all of the 4 Ps were informed by nationally conducted focus groups with their tweens, again, the youth ages from 9 to 17. And this these focus groups are specifically how the program involved these deep structure strategies. And so looking specifically at the first P, product, we see it most clearly resembles the behavioral construct of beliefs and attitudes. And it's where the program most clearly involves these deep structure strategies. So in the product component of the intervention, the communication materials were tailored to be coupled with things that the group already found valuable, such as images and associations of spending time with friends. And the second P of place, more clearly, is just the place in which the advertisements and communications would be the most effective for the population. They were a little more strategic and also were meant to be representative of what is being communicated. So them being able to be accessed at home when they are talking about engaging in physical activity at home. So then the next P of price is also associated with another behavioral construct of perceived benefits and then perceived risk. And this P guides the consumer or target audience to balance the benefits of the behavior with the perceived cost. And finally, the last P, promotion, is kind of the how behind the campaign. How do we best communicate the messages and advertisements? And this piece is kind of the most true to communications and marketing principles. So there were 4 different phases of the Verb campaign, and it was largely a community-based participatory. It had mainly a community-based participatory research backing, and the campaign was positioned to be more of a tween's own brand and not something that's just imposed by adults. So a lot of the images involved tweens specifically engaging in physical activity and were strategic in engaging with networks that tweens are most are going and watching the most because it was primarily on TV. So jumping into phase 1, the first phase was meant to bring awareness to the Verb brand. And through this phase, tweens were encouraged to find their verb, so to find an activity that specifically resonates with them. These advertisements were also made in partnership with brands such as Disney and Nickelodeon, so that kind of speaks to what I meant of the partnerships with the networks that tweens are already engaging with. And they would feature images of tweens as well as celebrities acting out the verbs such as jump and bounce, which kind of goes into part 2. Some of these phases blend together. And phase 2 focuses on associating free time with free time, physical activity, and then also with being on an organized sports team, all of the fun that comes with that. So messages involve bringing the fun of organized sports into your own backyard. And TV ads during this time involve tweens playing, and then there is sometimes a narration from a professional sports announcer in the background. A lot of them were just about making organized sports more accessible. So the third phase, building off of that, worked on the idea that you also don't need to play like a professional athlete to be active. And it really held on to the idea of anytime, anywhere for being active. And ads during this time include professional athletes and celebrities playing games with tweens. And a lot of them involved games that tweens would make up and have their own rules with, just kind of carrying through that message of make this your own, and it can be anytime, anywhere. And then the final phase, phase 4, involves a messaging platform. It was an online internet platform, and the intention here was to have tweens internalize the verb ideals and showcase their verb. This was also tied with the campaign's verb yellow ball. The yellow ball was meant to carry the message of here's my verb, and then pass it along to your friends. So there was a formal evaluations conducted both at the midpoint and at the end of the 4-year campaign. The evaluators looked at associations between exposure to verb and outcomes in 3 different cohorts. These different cohorts consisted of age groups that were at different phases of or at different age groups that were being exposed to the verb campaign and maybe phased out once they were no longer in the target age range. So in all 3 cohorts, outcomes that were assessed included physical activity sessions, both free time and organized, as well as psychosocial outcomes. And the findings from the evaluation showed significant ability to recall the campaign in all cohorts, showing that it did resonate and was prominent. And then reports from the cohort with youth ages 10 to 13 specifically showed a significant increase in physical activity as exposure to the campaign increased. Other findings included that dose response associations with positive psychosocial effects. So the more that they received exposure to the verb campaign messages, there was an increase in all of the different psychosocial elements that were being assessed. And they did find that these effects lessened as children aged out of the campaign or out of the target age range, kind of showing that the messages were not quite as salient as they got older. However, dose response associations did persist in 2016 for outcome expectations and free time physical activity. So still the more that the tween was exposed to verb advertisements, the more they had an increase of positive outcome expectations of engaging in physical activity, as well as engaged in free time physical activity. So still, overall, the intervention increased physical activity for this age group. So a few of the strengths and limitations of verb. One of the biggest strengths is that the intervention was informed by the target population, so this community-based participatory research component of it. The researchers really understood the age group, their beliefs, values, concerns, and so on, just to help create the campaign so that not only it resonated with the target audience, but that it also really specifically addressed the barriers and was strategically implemented. The intervention was multi-ethnic and did have both surface and deep structure strategies in place by having those 9 high-dose communities that were all over the country in different regions, and also having focus groups that consisted of youth of all different backgrounds. The intervention really was intended to reach all of the youth in the United States. The intervention was also evaluated using a longitudinal cohort study, so it really allowed researchers to follow the same groups of participants from the start to the end of the campaign. Having multiple cohorts also allowed for the researchers to compare groups of individuals that were at different ages during the campaign, so the lower age range and the upper age range, and the effectiveness of the campaign between all of those. One thing that the researchers did mention as a weakness was that all of the evaluation was done with self-report and that there was room for quite a bit of bias, and that is just the nature of self-report measures. One of the cohorts also did not have a true baseline measure. They did not detail too much about why one of the cohorts lacked this measure, but it makes one of the 3 not the most reliable. And so looking at the future steps, overall, this was a very successful mass media intervention. I can imagine that actually many of us recall seeing verb messages growing up. And so it did hold a high prominence within media and did a very good job of integrating with media that youth were being exposed to. However, next steps, if this type of program or intervention were to be implemented again, it would be beneficial to make sure that all cohorts had baseline, just so that all could be measured equally and weighed equally. Also, one of the less positive outcomes included less of a positive psychosocial outcome for as participants got older, and this was seen with the older cohort age group. And so perhaps a good future step could be creating another phase of tiers or tiers onto the phases that might tailor messages to older participants or partner with networks that older participants might be viewing more. And that maybe might mitigate the issue, make it still feel relevant and specifically tailored to them and what their interests are. But again, overall, this is a very well-known mass media intervention for youth physical activity, and all evaluations show that it was successful in achieving the goal of increasing physical activity. Thank you all so much for listening. Here are my references. And thank you again.